Welcome to the European Sport Congress podcast, where we discuss sport projects and priorities with amazing guests who are leading sport innovation. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe and to follow the European Sport Congress on social media. Joining us today, we have Olivia Conrad, Senior Project Officer for the Sport Division of the Council of Europe in the Odin Plus project. Olivia has a background in communication, having worked on the events, institutional visual identity, official visits, and visibility projects as the director of the communications of the Council of Europe for more than 2 decades. And she's also an awarded adventure racer, something that some would say it's an extreme sport. Good morning. How are you feeling?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really delighted to be your guest today on your podcast, especially discussing promoting greater gender equality, as we both know that it's our favorite topic. So thank you for having me today. I'm really glad that we finally get to meet and to talk to each other.
Thank you. I'm also very excited. I'm a big fan of the All In project. And since the first time we talked, I was so interested in your personal path as an adventure racer and as a communication and everything. So I think this will be an amazing conversation. So
Absolutely.
before we get into the projects themselves, I would like to learn more about your experience as an athlete in adventure race. So first of all, what is this and how did that passion started?
Okay, I'm gonna talk about one of my favorite topics. Actually, if you Google my name, you will find only pictures of me doing these crazy outdoorsy
Yes.
races. And sometimes it's funny because I do it. Well, I started 20 years ago actually, and I'm still amazed myself that 20 years later I'm still doing it every 6 months. And what it is about, it's basically women competing, but also doing it for fun, during mostly a weekend, sometimes a week. And we are doing what? Basically running, paddling, canoeing, biking, this kind of sports events are outdoor. You have to go from one point to another, but you're not doing it by yourself. As you can see on the poster behind me, you have to be in a team. So most of the time, the team are composed of two women, sometimes three women, and also you can have one or several men involved. But the idea is that the last 10 years, we decided as women that we needed more visibility, and some events were more focusing on women's ability and skills to make this kind of sport event.
Very well. So, but you said that it started being more focused on men, and now there was a shift to focus it on women, and it's also something done in group. What did you think caused this shift in the approach for adventure racing?
Yeah, I remember that at the beginning, all the organization members were men, and it was really striking for me because I really wanted to understand why women were not more involved in this organization. And athletes like me, we started to create a network and staying in touch, doing events together, and we decided after a while that definitely we needed more visibility, we needed more gender equality. And after a while, I would say maybe a decade, one of my best friend, Christelle Gauzet, who won the TV show, the survival show, Kolanta, decided that it was time for her to do it. And she created her own red multisport, which is called Defidel. And the idea was to focus on women, focus on families, mother and child or sisters, and doing it not only for competition but also for fun, and also to create values, and also help sometimes women suffering from cancer or other disease, but mostly breast cancer. And the idea was that the competition is not enough. We have to also think about the well-being and the social. Society has changed, so we have to take care of the people around us. And this is also why we call each other a family.
That's amazing, and it's amazing how inclusion can bring up all this different view on sport, like you were saying, not just about competition, but also about helping and spending time, quality time together, and overcoming challenges. Because I know that a couple of years ago, canoeing, biking, and all of that were not considered as appropriate, let's say, for women. But now we have broken the myth. Well, you have, for sure. I'm not doing all of that. Broken the myth and
It's a
taking
process.
on that. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like you have over 20 years as an adventure racer, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm still amazed, but maybe one day I'll decide to quit, but I'm not in that stage yet.
No, no, no. You should keep enjoying, and you have some awards as well, right? You've won some races.
Yeah, I mean, most recently in January, I had the chance to go in Lapland. And so it's the biggest part of Finland. It was minus 15 degrees, and I was so lucky there because won some amazing athletes like Muriel Urtis, the one that you can see on the poster behind me, who is a French athlete, really, really famous for people, women in my age. And I also had the chance to win this competition for the second time. So I was really, really thrilled.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
That's amazing, amazing. And as you were just mentioned, this also has that community sense to it, where people we bring people together and they spend some time. I think that these type of approaches of bringing these communities are especially relevant when we have actions made by women and organized by women, right? This sense of community. Why do you think that communities are so important in this type of initiatives?
First, I think it's a question of collective intelligence because, as you know, the African proverb is saying that you can run fast when you're running alone, but running together, you're going further, you're running further. And I like this African proverb because it's definitely the idea of doing it. I mean, you can register for race every weekend and marathon, then half marathon, and do it on yourself. But the idea is not just to compete for to get an award. The idea is that you're creating a team, but you're also part of this event with 70 other teams of women who have been trained for this event. And you share experience, you help each others. And sometimes women are suffering, and you're not passing by and just saying, "Oh, good luck." You help them. If someone is just falling from a bike, which happened in Lapland, just fall in the snow. You don't leave the people in the snow. You help the girl or the guy to stand up and to pursue the race. And this community is about values, sharing values. And it's important to say it because for instance, when you're doing it over a weekend, on Sunday, we don't race, we don't compete. We go on the beach and we collect all the wasted that we find, or we just simply do promotion for this association that we stood for, Keep a Breast, which is prevention of breast cancer. And so we are doing awareness campaigns for association who are sharing the same values as us as women as an athlete.
That's great. It's great to also see that thing of sustainability that you're bringing, like as you're saying, a collective. What was the name? Sorry, a collective intelligence.
Collective intelligence, yeah,
Exactly here. So it's not just about the sharing; it's also about the values that you are promoting. And
exactly.
yeah, and I feel this type of policies that that communities have been and community intelligence has been growing a lot, both also in diplomacy, for instance, and when it comes to governance. So I think that that was also one of the approaches that you had in the All-in project, for instance, but where you had all these institutions working together. Could you tell us a bit more about what this project was?
Yeah, so All In was a project or a joint project with the Council of Europe and European Union, funded in 2018 and 2019. And this 2 years campaign was really amazing in terms of data collection. So basically, after 2 years work on that specific field of promoting greater gender equality, they call it balance in sports. And all these activities about gender equality in sports and promotion and videos as well, we decided actually 4 years later that it was time to make comparison. So All In was focusing on 6 indicators So basically leadership, coaching, participation, media and communication, but gender-based violence as well. And finally, the gender equality policy and programs. And the idea is that after these 2 years, there was an analytical report, but fact sheets as well. And fact sheets are only concern one countries, in a total of 18 countries. And the interesting thing is that now we are in the process to launch another project, which is called Odin Plus, as you can see. And Odin Plus will also target the 18 countries, but other countries as well. And we're doing the same indicators. So we will be able to make a real comparison on the same indicators. We just added, and this is important for me, coaching and officiating, because actually when you look at the referees, women referees have definitely a visibility impact and issue. So we are also including them. And we are targeting ministries of sports in these countries, but also the IOC and also the Paralympic committees, which is new. Previously, it was not in the framework, but this is also a way to be more inclusive.
Exactly, because I feel like the conversation has also moved upwards from just women to different types of prejudice. For instance, women and people with inabilities. So I think that that's amazing. Yes. So you told me that you did a lot of research on this first project, and not just based on the research, but also on your personal knowledge and experience. What do you think are some of the areas in which we face the major challenges to gender equality in sport?
On the six indicator that I gave you, actually all of them are still in 2023 a big issue. So I would basically, for me, maybe focus on the gender-based violence, because as you can see in the social media, there are still all these awareness campaigns trying to protect women and girls from gender-based violence. But to me, this is still the biggest issue because it affects women for the rest of their life. And sometimes athletes are not talking it for decades, and the story pops up like 30 years, but it's too late on a legal point of view to make any complaint. And so for me, it's still a big challenge to achieve to make those athletes and coaches widely open about the situation, and to make sure that the government are protecting their athletes and their all basically all women and girls who are willing to simply do and practice a sport.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like safeguarding has been finally gaining a lot of more visibility and being a priority for different institutions. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, we have been seeing more and more stories of, well, especially gymnasts, I feel, that have been victims of violence. It's great to see that this has been getting better. I know that, for instance, the IOC has a great program for safeguarding as well, and I think that FIFA has well. So at
Yeah,
least things are
um,
improving.
yeah, definitely. Sport organization over the last decade have improved their communication and their policies, uh, doing, active programs, and I think that's something that on an international level has to be really focused and supported and backed up by all sport institutions, not only, as you mentioned, skating, gymnastic, equestrian, but more generally, or basically all sport federation have had this issue in the past. So we just simply don't know about it. That's the
Exactly.
thing.
And this thing that you were mentioning about vocalizing it and bringing visibility to these issues with also projects like this one, for instance, is very important. But well, then let's go back to communities for women to feel like they are supported by this community and that they can tell their own stories. It's also very, very important. Okay, now sorry.
Yeah, you know about this TED talk, and I heard recently a friend of mine who is a mother of 18 years old, and she say, my daughter has suffered from violence, and basically she couldn't talk about it, but she was spending time on the internet, and she found out that other women from the same background had suffered the same way. And sometimes social media can also help to spread out their voice and to make these girls and women know that their barriers are there. And definitely, if something happened during their sport activity, they should be loud about it and not wait for years to finally it would be too late for them.
Come out. Exactly. No, I completely understand. And also, for instance, what you were saying, one of the priorities that were studied in Olin, and one of the priorities that we also have in gender equality in sport is the media coverage. And I feel like that
Yeah,
also has something to do with it, because women, like men, are 90 represent 98% of the representation of athletes in the news, right?
yeah.
So this creates bias, even if unconsciously. What can we do? What do you think that we can do to tackle this?
Well, it's great that you are talking about this issue because, uh, as a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, I just attended an unconscious bias training, and one of our experts just explained us that the situation and the lack of visibility of women in media has been a fight for many institutions and NGOs for over 20 years. And still, now in 2023, they are still not happy about the situation. I mean, she just gave us an example, but uh, some coaches, female coaches, when they were coaching men, they were just victims of hate speech. And just recently, I had the great chance to see an interview of Amélie Mauresmo, and Amélie Mauresmo was the coach of Andy Murray in 2014 and 2016. And she said basically it has been the most interesting experience of her life. But during these 2 years were the 2 years when she suffered the most of the media hate speech and the way the journalists were attacking her constantly. Every time Andy Murray was losing a game, they were not attacking him, they were attacking Amélie Mauresmo. And see, it was only 10 years ago. And still she knows talking about this experience as a really great experience in terms of women visibility as coaches. And when you think about referees are victim of the same situation. It's very rare that you see a woman referee in football games, for instance, at a high elite level. And when it happens, they are suffering, of course, and are victims of hate speech on the field. Those they have a more impactful way, I think, to be able to change things because there are these legal aspects, at least in France, where they are protected and they can also put complaint and stop this kind of amazing behavior that we can see on the field. So I think on the media side, there's still a lot of to be done, but media training definitely can help, and this is one of the objective of Olin Plus. So basically, we will have this media training organized in October for a majority of journalists interested in gender equality, but people who are multipliers. And we definitely hope that this one-day multiplier training for multipliers will be creating a new area where people are free to have a positive narrative and to be able to see a woman as an athlete and not as a woman.
Exactly. You talked about, for instance, female referees, and I was just remembering how important it is to have examples. There is this video that went viral on the internet of a female referee at a football game, and she's bringing out the yellow card, and the players are screaming on her face, and she doesn't move. It's so usual to see it in men that it goes by, but when I saw her as a woman, I was like, I want to have that confident. I want to be like that, because I feel like we don't have enough examples of this type of attitudes and of women in sports. Like you were saying, that's great. And yeah, definitely bringing more visibility to it. I know that the All In project, for instance, also did some materials on that. You have a campaign, for instance, which is lead like a woman, train like a
Yeah.
woman. That's
Um, these videos are actually to me still amazing, because they are have been produced for the last all in campaign, but I recently watched them, and the situation that they're reporting is still accurate. So there is basically free video clips that are still on the website, and I think everyone should at least have a look at them. It's just 2 minutes video clip, and one of them is called the locker rooms talk, and it's targeting the men in the lockers room to change their behavior and the way that they are talking to each others. This was done in Sweden in 2018. And then the second video is also very impactful and creative. It's called Lead Like a Woman. So it's more like an inspirational video campaign that was made in Finland, just to make sure that women can access to leadership position and should not be demotivated to at least go for elections. And finally, the third is called the Women in Sport program, and that has been done in Ireland on a gender equality broader campaign. And the Irish government insisted for the participation, the leadership, but also the coaching and visibility of Irish athletes at that time. And they wanted basically to narrow the gap, between men and women. And their idea and their goal was to just make sure that there won't be any gap in 2027. So we will see in 3 years' time from now if they have achieved this goal. But it's definitely, if it's a political will and the government is giving some money and making some policies and programs, definitely the results are being shown in the data collection process.
That's amazing to see how it's a governmental issue. And now that we're talking about that, and I know that these videos also have some practical, they show success stories, for instance. Can you tell us a bit more for either for governmental and for sport institutions? What can they do to tackle gender inequality in their boards, in their activity?
On the website that we still are working on, we have definitely decided to stay and to keep the parts showing the best practices. So the best practices are multilateral. They are concerning association, government, NGOs. Everything is still reporting the situation of gender inequalities and what was done on a specific target and specific topic. And one of my most favorite example is the program that was led by UEFA in 2010. It was called the Women's Football Development Program, so WFDP. And what I like about it, it's a series of that they call it free kicks, and they're focusing on knowledge sharing, but also on practical course and advisory programs, and not only on field but also off field. And they also have these six key areas that we're focusing on, including coaching and referring. So I think this program was very inspirational. They invested, I think, more than 20 millions over the years for projects around these partners. And the result for me is that, of course, the figures show that the women are more participating in football in general, but also they have more respect. And the way that the coach and also the officiating people around them are protecting them. They're not only taking care of the physical aspect, but they're also taking care of the psychological aspect, which is something new in football. So it's not about qualitative, quantitative. Sometimes it's all about qualitative, and how can we change the behavior of the people around these women and these girls.
Exactly. Also, mental health has been a growing issue in sport, but I feel like for women specifically, there have been some very specific um, programs, but it's very important because women also suffer, as you were just mentioning, for this external pressure, from the prejudice that they're not good enough, they cannot do it, and usually for the lack of visibility, the lack of example. So they're an especially fragile group that needs to be taken into account, and their mental health has well. Very well. And sorry, just going back a bit to the research that was done into all these amazing case examples, what were for you some of the key findings of the All In project?
Well, it's very interesting to make comparisons countries per countries. And the idea is that in when they started to do the joint project, so they basically launched a formal call, and the countries interested in the topic of gender equality just raised and they say that they wanted to be partners. So they collected 18 countries at that time, and
In Europe, correct?
what?
So all of them in Europe, correct?
No, that's what I was going to say. We also had Israel, for instance, and this is interesting to make comparison between countries because, as you know, Finland is just the most common example in terms of gender equality in Europe. But it's good to compare Finland and Israel, for instance, and the figures are amazing. In Israel, there are about 74% of girls or women active in sport, as in Finland, it was 79%. And for female elite athletes, the figures are 48 for Israel and 68 for Finland. And basically, concerning leadership, it was about 14% of female president in sport federation, which is the highest percentage for Finland, as the average was 31. So these figures are really interesting to read. So you can have a look on the website. There is this analytical report, and as I said, also the country fact sheets. And the good thing is that there is also this dashboard with an interactive map where you can find very specific data from the previous All-in campaign.
Okay, very, very well. So I think that Finland is still taking the lead on gender equality in Europe, but
Yeah.
40% of women in leadership positions, that's what you said, right? That's amazing
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
sport.
40% of female vice presidents in Finland, and 29% of women on board of sports federation, which is also the highest rate in Europe.
Exactly. Those are some of the highest numbers I've listened to. Surely they're doing something very, very right. That's great to see. And now you will, on the All In Plus project, you will follow up with that data, right?
Yeah, so last week we had this meeting with our governing board, and we definitely told them about the new project, Odin Plus. The idea is that we would definitely be willing to work with the same 18 countries, and some of them already replied to our call and saying that they will be amazed, definitely willing to take part of it. We are expecting others to join, and as I say, it's just started in May, so we'll be hardly working on the summer to catch up with them and make sure that we have an amazing media training in October in Lausanne.
Exactly. So let me just see if I get this straight. So the first one, All In, was more about collecting data and making resources that could promote gender equality. Now, this second project is more about, well, following up on that data, but also bringing more visibility, as we were just mentioning, to the gender equality gap in sport, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Do you know the media sensitization is the third pillar of the project? And the media sensitization is definitely something that we will put a major focus on. Because basically, as you said and explained, the lack of visibility for women in print media, but also on TV media, is still just absolutely amazing. So we will focus on the media sensitization, doing this media training, and also we will be producing video kits. As you saw, the free clips that I just mentioned are still very accurate, and we are trying to now focusing on the new issues, and we will be delivering also new video content at the end of the 2 years program.
Yeah, that's amazing. I hope you have great results. I know that sadly, I still get way too excited when I hear, for instance, a woman commenting football. I like football and I like to hear the comments, but still, whenever I hear a woman, it's like, yay, another one, finally. But it's still a surprise and not a practice to have female voices in sport.
Well, we do have many, I would say, models, journalists, at least in France, because that's the country I was being living in the last 30 years. And in France, women are fighting and they are very keen to organize themselves as a network. So there is this collective which called Women in Sport Journalists, who is very, very active in Paris, and they're collecting information about the status and the issues of journalists, of women journalists in sport, but they're also asking the media to sign a charter for gender equality. And as long as I know, the last week there were 52 media networks that has agreed to sign this charter, which shows that the impact is there and they're progressively achieving their goals.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
this kind
That's
of a
amazing.
yeah, this collective, I think, is a very good example of networks that are impactful on the everyday's life.
Exactly, and that's perfect for my next question, which is about this collective and what we have been talking about. And I feel that this is really, really important. I'm sorry if I'm being repetitive, but really important to tackle gender equality, which is coming together, raising awareness, sharing experience, but all within a community. So, what would you have to say to organizations, sport organizations that are still building this network? What can they do to promote a more collective experience and collective of individuals?
Well, first, I would say you definitely have to register for the European Sport Congress, because that will be a great opportunity to share experience and also share our values. Because actually, we're not fighting on our own. We're not doing it only at the Council of Europe and the European Union. I mean, many sport organizations have definitely a program, sustainability program, and they're keen to make things change at a higher level. So I would say, don't be afraid, and also spread the voice. The more collective we can be, the bigger and the higher we will go. And the idea is that we definitely need to exchange our situation, exchange the best practices, see what has been working in the past, what was a failure, for which reason, and target the program. So that's also the idea of data collection. It's about seeing where we could be the most impactful in terms of activities and future programs, and see kind of who is the targets that we need to focus on. Is it women victims of gender-based violence? Is it women suffocating because of the media on coverage? Situation like that, expressing by the datas, then help us to make the most impactful programs and policy. And so my advice would be, I mean, share the word, or open your eyes and your collection and network, and make it as broad as possible, to make sure that you're not losing the point, and that you're focusing and targeting the right people at the right time.
That's an amazing advice, actually, to know yourself and know what are your weaknesses and your strengths, so that you can build from them, and to build from what others are doing as well, so that you can be an even stronger network. Let's call it that, like that. That's amazing, and I'm happy that you also mentioned the European Sport Congress, because we do have gender equality has a value. We do have to try to have an equity in the speakers being women and men. And we do have one day fully dedicated to speaking about this issue and to sharing good practices. You will also be a speaker there. And that leads me to my final questions. What are your expectations for the European Sport Congress?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be present and to meet, or you said that there will be about 200 participants, which really means that this will be a very impactful event. And the idea is that such events are very rare. We need to take this occasion and opportunity to make our work known, and also sometimes share initiatives, see if there is something that we could create in common. We as a public sector are not yet working with private sector, but there are sometimes initiative. I know, for instance, that Adidas has created this program focusing on gender equality and diversity and inclusion. So, I mean, the idea is that we need to see if, while opening sometimes boxes, we can find creative ideas. And just this forum, I think, will be a creative one, gathering amazing people, because I already saw the speakers and listen to the podcast that you've made in the past. It will be interesting for us as institution to make well known that what we are working on currently, but also see the progress that we could do with the impact of other organizations, people from the private and public sector, government, NGOs, and also athletes and referees. Sometimes when we have a chance to talk to them, we discover that there is a huge gap between what we think is the situation and the situation currently in the field.
Exactly, that's a great approach to it. To keep talking, keep building, to build, keep discovering. Very well. Now, Olivia, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you so much for all the insights and examples that you brought about. Great examples of institutions that are tackling gender equality. And thank you so much for also being an inspiration and for your own path until here. I'm looking forward to having you in Hihong and to finally to conclude our conversation.
Thank you so much, Sophia. It was really a pleasure to discuss all this with you. I really like the approach that you've created, and that I could also speak about my personal experience. And definitely, it's something that I'm willing to share with the participant of the Open Sport Congress in Gijón. I hope I pronounce well,
Very well.
in in September. So thank you for having me today, and hopefully we'll get more chances to talk about the project later on.
The European Sport Congress brings together stakeholders from all over Europe to showcase their work, connect with potential partners, and learn from the experts. The 2023 edition of this event will take place in Spain this September, and you can find all the information and register at www.sportcongress.eu.